Και πάμε κυρίες και κύριοι σε αυτό το σημείο που νομίζω ότι έτσι έχει μια νοηματική ροή το πράγμα. Να δούμε αυτή την εξαιρετικά ενδιαφέρουσα συνέντευξη που πήρε η Σοφία Παπαγιάννου από την Naomi Klein, μια γυναίκα διανοούμενη από τον Καναδά, η οποία με το περίφημο αυτό βιβλίο, Το Δόγμα του Σοκ, έχει, αν θέλετε, έτσι, ταρακουνήσει τη διεθνή κοινή γνώμη εδώ και αρκετό καιρό. Πάμε να δούμε αυτή την πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα συνέντευξη.
Thank you very much for granting us this interview. What brings you in Greece?
I'm here doing research for my next book, which is going to be out in a year, and it's about climate change. It's about the ecological crisis, and it's looking at how the economic crisis is being used to really sacrifice the environment, to say to countries caring about the environment, caring about climate change is a luxury that you can't afford in the midst of an economic crisis. And I think this is quite disastrous, and I think Greece is a very strong example of what I'm describing.
Where are you going to focus your research, in which areas of Greece and on which topics?
Well, I first started looking into this because of the conflict over the gold and copper mining near Halkidiki, and because it's a Canadian company and I'm Canadian, and so in Canada we're sort of following this issue of Skouries. But then I started noticing that it isn't only minerals, it isn't only metals, it's also, there's a big rush on for oil and gas extraction in the Ionian and Mediterranean, in the Aegean Sea, and also water privatization. So all of these natural resources now, where you're seeing privatizations, you're seeing a push for more extraction, and also, and this is not unique to Greece, policies that were designed to get European countries to meet their targets under the Kyoto Protocol to lower their emissions, shift to renewable energy. These are all being rolled back in the midst of economic crisis. We have to remember that the economic crisis is not the only crisis we're facing. We're also facing an ecological one.
If we do, you mentioned the gas exploitation in Greece. Because of the financial crisis, we have raised a lot of hopes about finding oil or gas in our seas. And do you think that we should proceed with exploiting it, or it will be dangerous for our environment and our sea?
The way the promise of oil and gas is being held up for the Greek people is tremendously dishonest and unfair. Because I've been reading the reports, and it's sometimes, not all the time, but some people are holding up the possibility of a gas boom or an oil boom as being the way out of austerity. You know, I even saw an article where they said the amount that Greece spends on importing oil and gas is the same amount that our creditors want from us. So if we explore for oil and gas, then we won't have to have austerity. And I think this is a tremendously seductive message for a country in as much pain as Greece. But the truth is that the timelines don't match up. It takes a very long time to do the testing, to get the results back, to build these huge rigs, then to start extracting, then to start getting revenue. It's not oil or austerity, it's oil and austerity. Greece's creditors want their money back in the short term. So actually what you end up having is just using the crisis as the impetus, the panic to go after the oil and gas and to get the Greek people to sacrifice their ecology.
No, we've searched for oil and gas for decades now, and we haven't found, or we haven't done the research that was more proper. So we're not being asked to drill right now to find oil in order for other people to exploit it. We wanted to find oil by ourselves for many years now.
But the pressure is the pressure to pay the debt.
No, nobody said that they're going to get our money from the oil in order to pay the debt. Nobody said that.
Well, I've certainly read articles saying that.
But it's not written anywhere in the memorandum that that's the case.
No, it's not written in the memorandum, no. But do you think that Greece would be doing that without an economic crisis, that Greece would be willing to accept those risks?
Oh, of course, because we have searched for oil in the past as well when we didn't have any crisis. And even if we get some money from the oil and gas, and even if we take some of this money and pay the debt, is it bad, you think?
Well, we've already talked about this. I mean, it depends if you're worried about climate change, you know, but that's not only Greece's responsibility, that's the responsibility of every country with an extractive industry. But I do think that this moment in history where we've just passed 400 parts per per million of carbon in the atmosphere, and where the climate crisis is becoming increasingly intense, that to decide that now is the moment where you really want to get into fossil fuels, when actually you have such huge potential for renewable energy, that to me seems like a strange decision, especially because it can carry such tremendous risks of accidents.
Now let's go to the shock doctrine. If you can explain to us what exactly did you mean by the shock doctrine, and why did you research on that topic?
Yeah. Well, the shock doctrine is the phrase I came up with to describe the use of crisis to put through policies that are so unpopular that you could not put them through without a crisis. I'm not arguing that the crises are created in order to exploit them. Like even the debt crisis. No, they're not creating it. They're just not fixing it, and they're letting it fester.
How does this theory applies to what's happening today in Europe?
What's happening in Europe is a pretty classic example of what I wrote about in the book. You have a crisis that really was created by the banks. It began on Wall Street, and instead what started to happen is they passed the crisis on to the people who hadn't created the crisis. But they told them, it's all your fault. We all did this together. You overindulged. That was the language that was used here in Greece. The slogan on the streets, which started in Italy, was we won't pay for your crisis. Because that's really what's being asked of people, is to pay for the crisis created by the elites through cuts to healthcare, education, public sector salaries, and then ultimately the auctioning off of the state's assets, whether that's water, oil, gas, trains, airlines, whatever's left. Most countries have already sold off those things, but in Greece, I think there's a particular frenzy because Greece actually did not go the full neoliberal way, right? Greece still has state assets that have not been sold off in previous shock therapy experiments. So there's a lot of interest in those assets.
But you don't think that Greece as a country can get some money out of this privatization?
If you're interested in getting, you can get some money, but I don't think you're going to get a good price, because people with a gun to their head are not good negotiators. There's a desperation in this moment in Greece. So if you are interested in what was best for the Greek economy, and that's where the oil and gas comes in, if you're thinking long term, then you would hold on to those assets until at least until you know how much gas you have. This is a terrible way to do business for the country, and this is the way you get a very good deal. This is a very good deal for the buyers, not for the sellers. I think Greek people understand that. They're told they have no choice. That's the point. Everything is told. Everything is the discourse of there is no alternative. Mm-hmm. Nobody is claiming this is the best possible situation in which to sell your assets.
But which is the alternative then?
Not to sell your assets.
And how are we going to get some money to exit this crisis?
Well, then it comes down to the question of whether Greece is willing to leave the Eurozone, whether Greece is willing to form a bloc with other countries in a similar situation. I think one of the real lost opportunities of these moments is that all the countries that are facing austerity, that are facing these sort of shock tactics, are kept isolated and don't use their full negotiating power. Now, if you're just one country, standing up to the IMF in that moment, then you're going to lose. But if you're 5 countries, the IMF is actually a lot more concerned than you, because after all, they're the ones lending the money. And this is always the great fear of international finance, is debtors' cartels.
Now, we have a debt crisis, but we were in the brink of not having money to pay wages and salaries. That's why they said they wanted to lend some money from abroad.
Did you have any option? Is that the question? Like, did you have to take their bailout? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's the question. If we had any other option, you think?
I think that they probably could have negotiated better terms. I do think that. But the Greek people were lied to on a lot of different fronts. You had I think you have an economic crisis in Greece, there's no doubt, but you have a democratic crisis in Greece. And I think that that's a huge part of what's going on here. And
what do you mean?
I think that people are losing faith in democracy in this country, and because most people's definition of democracy is that you vote for politicians. They do things that bear some resemblance to what they promised they were going to do. And also, you vote for politicians who have some power. And what I see is a tremendous sense of helplessness. I mean, all of your questions today is just they're all about no choice, no choice, no choice, right? There was no other choice. This message is just being drilled into people. You have absolutely no choice. No matter who you vote for, nothing changes. If people hear this enough, they will completely lose faith in democracy. And they should, because that's not democracy. You have to have some power over your destiny, some idea that collectively you can reshape the kind of country you have. It can somehow reflect your desires, your dreams, your aspirations as a nation. And what has happened is that being part of the European Union has become this prison for people where they didn't realize, they became part of the Union during good times. And they didn't realize that they gave up sovereignty. They gave up the power to actually affect their economy. And this is a very dangerous and scary thing to do to a country because people need some kind of control. And if they're told again and again by their politicians and by their media that they have no choice, no control, the power is all elsewhere, then they will find,
the other choice?
They will find some part of their life that they can control. And that may be scapegoating immigrants. That may be the rise of these extreme ideas. But people will find some area where they can have some control. And that to me is the scariest part of what this message. There is no alternative. There is no alternative. The power is elsewhere.
But what are the other
Renegotiate
options?
the terms of your debt. Leave the European Union with other countries as a bloc. Start another union. Do something.
Okay, what happens if we leave the European Union as a bloc with other southern countries?
Then you could have another economic bloc.
But the majority of people in the recent poll said that they want to stay in the euro.
They want to stay in the euro because they're so afraid of what's on the other side. That the alternative is worse.
You're not afraid of what's on the other side?
This is why I'm saying that blocs of countries need to negotiate together, because I do think it is scary for one country to go at it alone. Fortunately for Greece, you're not the only one who's got a gun to your head. There are a lot of countries that are being asked to make completely unacceptable sacrifices, and unacceptable sacrifices for the ability to live a life of dignity, to have health care, education, provide for your family, but also to protect your natural environment and your long-term future. These are unacceptable demands that are being made.
Maybe with this theory that somebody else is to blame, Greeks forget that for years now we were living beyond our means. We have so many problems like tax evasion, and all these things have to be solved before we try to create a new economy or a new coalition of countries.
I think you should solve it yourself. I think the idea of just trusting some faceless experts, at the European Central Bank or in Germany is, it's irresponsible and it's infantilizing to a country to believe that you you don't know what's best for yourselves. You want some faceless father figure somewhere else to do what you can't do yourselves. You're giving up on democracy if that's what you believe.
The alternative, maybe the alternative that you say we should search is not as strong. And that's why people are not mobilized.
There, you and I agree completely that there has been a failure also on the left to articulate a credible alternative that inspires people, that is a vision for an economy that genuinely serves people, that doesn't sacrifice the environment, that is really sustainable and rooted. No, I think that the left so far has only been saying no, and has not done a good enough job of articulating an alternative that inspires people, feels credible, and that's a failure too. Absolutely, that's a failure.
Even in Greece, you mean the leftist parties in Greece?
Yes, even in Greece. Yeah, yeah. I think that that's the task ahead, and it's a tremendous responsibility, tremendous moral responsibility to show people that there is another way, that there is real hope, that it's credible, because we're seeing the rise of neo-fascist forces filling that vacuum, and responding to people's sense of powerlessness in a way that's terrifying. So it's a moment of great responsibility for the left in this country, not just in this country, but I would say especially in this country. And you get no argument from me, saying that we've done our part. no, I don't think that the left has been visionary enough.
And what advice would you give the Greeks?
I gave all the advice that I feel comfortable giving as an outsider, which I think is the most important thing. The two most important things that I think need to happen is that all the countries that are being prescribed unacceptable levels of austerity need to get together and negotiate as a bloc. And the other thing is that the left needs to get more articulate and more visionary in providing a vision of another way of organizing the economy. I think that the left is so scared of being cast as extremist, because that's been the discourse in the media here. You have these two extremes. You've got Golden Dawn, and then you have the left. And I think it's an absolute false equivalency. And the danger of that is that it creates a left that is so afraid and so moderate that it doesn't provide that alternative. And that, to me, would be a great shame.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.